So Move is a small boutique clinic located right in the heart of downtown Ottawa. We are equipped with large private treatment rooms, a fully equipped gym, and we have an amazing team of 6 physiotherapists that practice multidisciplinary practices and treat a variety of cases, including gender-inclusive pelvic health. We also offer 4 unique specialty programs, being Move Strong, Move to Run, Move Steady, and yoga therapy. With that, I think we have most of our attendees in, so I'll let it be passed over to Laurel now to guide you through our webinar today, but I'll jump back in at the end should anyone have any questions that they want to type into the chat. Over to you, Laurel.
All right. Hi, everyone. Just give me a moment here to get set up. All right. Can you see everything all right, Savannah?
Yes, I can. It looks great.
Okay, perfect. All right. So hi, everyone. As Savannah mentioned, my name is Laurel, and I'm a physiotherapist resident here at Move Physiotherapy. So thanks so much for joining the webinar tonight. We're so excited to have you here and excited to dive into this topic. It's a really important one and a really interesting one. So we hope that you get something out of this session. And again, feel free to jot down any questions you might have throughout the presentation. And then we'll have a little question and answer period at the end. So tonight we're talking about strength and how it relates to aging. And we'll just go through here our topics that we'll be covering today. Okay, I think I'm all set up here. So the first, we're going to go through the loss of muscle mass as we age and some facts and statistics behind aging and muscle strength and muscle mass as that happens. We'll then discuss the importance of strength on our health span and on our lifespan. And then we'll discuss what we can do about it. So how we can make an impact and how we can help in physiotherapy as well. And then at the end, I'll give you a rundown on some of the fundamental movements that should be incorporated into your exercise programs. And then I'll give you a demo as well on some of those movements. All right, so we'll get started here. So I'll start off by explaining what happens as we age. So there's a term here on the screen that you can see called sarcopenia. And what sarcopenia is it's an age-related loss of muscle mass and function. And this is characterized by progressive and generalized loss of skeletal muscle mass and strength. And it's directly correlated with physical disability, poor quality of life, and even death. It's not a disease in itself. It's more of a process that many people undergo as they age. And it's also something that's closely related to osteopenia, which is the reduction in bone mineral density that happens as you age as well. And that's often a precursor to osteoporosis, which many people have probably heard about. So the risk factors of sarcopenia include age, gender, and level of physical activity. And like what we're going to be speaking about today, we can actually have an impact on this as we age. So I'll talk a little bit about what happens. So the reduction in muscle mass and strength that we have when we age is caused by a number of factors. This includes changes to our hormones like testosterone and the growth hormone, reduced appetite, reduced physical activity, and the presence of other diseases like cancer, congestive heart failure, and COPD. And what happens physiologically is that there's a reduction in the number of muscle fibers that we have in our muscles. So the actual number of fibers decreases as well as the size of those fibers. So that leads to a general decrease in the muscle mass, and then as well directly to the strength that that muscle is able to generate. We also know that as we age, the repair capacities of our muscles are reduced as well. And also that we have a greater loss of fast twitch muscle fibers as we age compared to slow twitch muscle fibers. So what that means is that the fast twitch muscle fibers are responsible more for power generation and more explosive movements. So that means that we're losing those types of muscle fibers more frequently or more at a faster rate than the slow twitch muscle fibers. So that all contributes to how we age and how we feel as we age as well. As you can see here on the screen, we've got a little bit of a timeline. So at about 20 to 30 years old, we're reaching kind of our maximum peak physical capacity between these ages. And then from about 20 to 30 years old to middle age, we see that our activity levels, our muscle mass, our muscle power, and our muscle strength, they all remain relatively consistent. Fast forward, we get to older than 50 years old, and then we see pronounced changes with aging. So that translates into more than a 15% loss of strength per decade. And then greater than 65 years old, we see muscle mass and activity levels that observe an even greater decline, which increases even more after age 75. And then by age 80, the average person will have lost 8 kilograms, so about 18 pounds of muscle compared to their peak. And those who keep higher activity levels will actually lose much less muscle, so 7 to 9 pounds on average versus 18. So we'll talk more about how we can have an impact on this, but the key takeaway here is that we really can have an impact. There's kind of an inevitable decline that we will all probably experience, but we can have a big impact on that with lifestyle choices. Okay, so here we can see a couple graphs here at the top. So the first graph A, we can see on the y-axis, we have the muscle cross-sectional area, which means kind of when we take a muscle and slice it, and then we look at it from a bird's eye view. So, and then we have age on the x-axis. So we can see that as we age, that mass, so that cross-sectional area, just progressively decreases as we age. And then on graph B, we can see that we have a loss of fast twitch type 2 muscle fibers as we age as well. So we can see that kind of steady decline in those types of muscle fibers. The interesting pictures are the ones on the bottom. So in the first photo, so photo C, this is a healthy male. So this is again the cross-sectional area, which I mentioned. So we're kind of looking at the muscle from a bird's eye view here. And you can see all of the darker gray area around that kind of center small little circle. The darker gray area is all of muscle mass. And at the bottom of the picture, you can see fat-free mass. So that's the same thing as muscle mass, a similar thing. So in this healthy 24-year-old male, we can see that the muscle mass itself takes up a greater proportion of that picture. And then on the small outside border in the white, that's the fat mass. The middle picture, so picture D, it's a similar cross-sectional area, but it's one of an inactive male, so a 66-year-old inactive male. And you'll notice that there's much more fat deposits here actually between the muscle fibers themselves. So you'll see all of this white, these white spots kind of in between the muscle, and then also in greater fat deposits on the outside of the muscle itself as well. And then photo E is also a 66-year-old man, but this male is an active male. So you can see that the actual muscle tissue itself looks a lot different, and it looks a lot closer to that of the 24-year-old. And then when we're looking at the numbers at the bottom, we can see here too a big difference in that as well. So for the active 66-year-old male, we can see that the muscle mass is 36 kilograms versus the inactive 66-year-old male whose muscle mass is 13 kilograms. So this picture is just really showing us that being active really has a protective effect on our muscles and on the quality of our muscles themselves as we age. All right, so moving on here. Okay, so we know that this happens. Why is it important? Why should we care about maintaining our strength and our muscle mass as we age? So there's a few things that we know, and we know that maintaining a healthy muscle mass and muscle strength is correlated to living longer. So that term is what our lifespan is. Lifespan means the length of life, the total number of years we live. And then health span can be thought of as our quality of life. So it's the duration of our life that's spent in good health without chronic disease or age-related disorders. And extending your health span allows you to spend more years completing activities and completing things that you enjoy doing. Excuse me. So really, what we've learned from many different studies is that having larger muscle strength and muscle mass has been shown to be correlated with living longer, so extending that lifespan. And then we also know that it improves our health span as well, so our quality of life, sorry. So it can reduce the risk of falls, it can reduce the risk of developing health conditions like type 2 diabetes, obesity, heart disease, cancer, and even neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's. And maintaining strength and muscle mass can also help with the signs and symptoms of chronic conditions like arthritis, back pain, obesity, and diabetes, and actually improve how we feel even if we have those conditions. It can also reduce the risk of adverse events post-surgery or post-falls. And then we also know that it has a great impact on our mobility, our physical function, our bone density, so a protective effect from osteoporosis, as well as our overall health and fitness. In terms of strength training itself, other benefits include improved mental health, self-esteem, self-efficacy, and our sleep and energy levels. So there's lots of things here where we know that maintaining our strength and our muscle mass is super beneficial in many different areas of our lives. And you'll see here on the graph, so this is a graph of health span and lifespan. So on the y-axis, we see the health span, and on the x-axis, we see the lifespan. So what we see here on this graph is that at around middle age, most people will start kind of declining in terms of their health span. So in terms of their poor versus optimal being on this y-axis. So around middle age, most people start to decline. And it will be a kind of gradual, slow decline until the end of life. So that's what we see on this the bottom line of the graph. Often this slow decline is associated with disease, poor mobility, poor physical function, and that just progressively declines as we get older. And then the top line here, just above, shows us a different trajectory. So what we see is that the decline doesn't actually happen until much later in life here. So the term that's been used to describe this is called squaring the health span lifespan curve. So we're trying to increase the area under this curve, meaning that when the decline does happen, it's going to happen a lot quicker, and it's going to have happened a lot later in life. So you will have had many more years in good health doing things that you enjoy by the time you reach the end of life. So essentially, we want to not only improve how long we live, but also the quality of life that we're living as well. So that's where the term squaring the curve comes, trying to extend not only our lifespan, but also our health span. All right. Okay, so what can we do? What can we do to maintain or build our strength as we age? The number one way, and what we're going to be talking about today, is with strength training. The good news overall is that we can influence what we just spoke about with many different lifestyle factors. So with good nutrition, with exercise, with sleep, stress management, and even social interaction, all of those can contribute to our health span. And those are all things that we can modify, at least in some respect. And we also know that even if you're starting to make these changes later in life, that's still going to have a really good, a really positive impact onto your life in general. So we can really make positive changes at any age. It doesn't matter what age we are when we start. So again, what we'll be talking about today is the strength training piece here. And we want to think about banking muscle mass and strength. So what we mean by that is if we want to be able to do something in the future, so example, you want to be able to lift your 20-pound grandchild up from the floor when you're 75. If that's your goal, then we need to make sure that you're able to lift much heavier than that now if you're 50. So again, if you're thinking about your long-term goals, what we want to do is make sure that you can achieve those goals at your current age and even more so that you're able to get to those goals later on when you have experienced some decline that most people will have when they age. So that's where the term kind of banking muscle mass and strength comes from. And on the graph here on the right, so we see two lines again. So the first line is kind of a typical trajectory. And then the second one that's further up shows that if we can make our peak in terms of muscle mass and strength, if we can improve that peak and make the peak greater, we'll actually have, we'll actually have less of a decline. So we want to think about increasing the peak so that our decline isn't as steep. And that's where the strength training and the exercise piece comes in. So we're banking our gains at our current age to minimize the losses that we see in the future. And that doesn't really matter at what age we're doing that, as long as we're trying to maximize the most out of what age we are currently at to try and minimize our future losses. All right. So we know that strength training is important now. Let's talk about the recommendations, what's recommended by the World Health Organization, and then how we can actually implement that into our lives. So the recommendations from the World Health Organization is that adults aged 18 to 64, and then all older adults, which they deem older than 65 years old, take part in muscle strengthening activities at least 2 days per week. And this is on top of the aerobic physical activity that's also recommended. So they recommend at least 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity, or 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic physical activity. So that's our cardiovascular exercise. And then the strength training piece is the additional 2 days a week where we're doing things that are involving all major muscle groups and working specifically on the strength of our muscles. We also see here on the right-hand side of the graph that older adults 65 years and older should do multi-component physical activity that emphasizes functional balance and strength training at moderate or greater intensity. And that's on 3 or more days a week. So not only specific exercises to target our muscles, but also incorporating balance and functional movements into our programming. Moving on. Oops. Okay. So how can we help with this in physiotherapy? There's lots of recommendations here. There's lots of things that we can see online, but sometimes it's hard to actually put into practice. So clinically, what we see in physiotherapy is that there are many barriers that people often talk about for why they're not engaging in strength training. So I'll go through some of those main reasons that we see here and talk through them. So the first one is a time commitment. So people are often mentioning to us that they don't have the time to exercise or engage in strength training. And that's kind of where we need to come in at it with the lens of how can we make strength training a priority into your daily life? We know how important it is. We know the research on it. So what can we do in your day-to-day to make this a priority? Maybe there are other parts in your day that we can try to streamline, which would give us more time to complete a workout. And even if that's just 20 to 30 minutes of the day, at least it's something. So any little bit here counts. And we do need to encourage people to take a good look at their day and try and figure out what we can do to prioritize our health, no matter how much time we have. So that's the time commitment piece. The second one is people who don't enjoy strength training. And if that's the case for you, we encourage you to try and find an activity or a version of strength training that you do enjoy. So there's tons of different kinds of strength training. They all have amazing benefits to your health. So we would encourage you to try and find one that feels good and that you enjoy. And then in the case that you don't find anything that you enjoy, you can't really find a strength training program or a kind of strength training that you like, then again, it's kind of shifting into, okay, we know the benefits still. So is it worth it to still invest in this, even if I don't enjoy it, in order to do things that I do enjoy with more ease? So if you want to play with your grandkids, but you're often in discomfort when you do so, maybe it is worth investing in the strength training, even if you don't really enjoy it, so that you're able to enjoy playing with your grandchildren and not be in so much discomfort when you do so. So it's about kind of trying to focus on how it's going to help us in the long run and doing what we can to make sure that we do enjoy it. And if we don't, then how do we prioritize it anyways? Another big category is people who fear injuring themselves, or people who lack the confidence and knowledge strength training. So this is where a physio can be extremely helpful, because we've got the knowledge to guide you through the exercise programs and can really modify everything based on you and your current challenges and your current goals. And really our goal is to guide you and encourage you to feel confident when you're training, and then with the goal of doing that on your own later on. So a big part of that is just about educating our clients on proper form, proper training practices, and how they can integrate this into their day a bit more easily. And then after that, we also see people who are hesitant to strength train due to injuries. So this can be because of lots of reasons. So whether they sustained an injury trying to strength train, so maybe they jumped into exercises that were a bit too advanced for them, or their current fitness level, or they started using weights that were probably too heavy and not something that they could handle at the current time. Injuries are pretty common when starting out a strength training program if you're not used to it. And unfortunately, all too often we see people who jump into a training program on their own, and then they end up injured, which ends up just basically discouraging them even more. And then they're even further from their goals. So injuries can often lead to setbacks that way, and getting into a cycle where people are afraid to train and strength train because they're afraid of injury. So we want to try and avoid that, and avoid the cycle of that this will bring on. And the other thing is, sometimes people avoid strength training due to pre-existing injuries. So it's not that they're getting injured when they start strength training, but maybe they have an injury or a pre-existing condition before they even start. Oftentimes when this is the case, people are hesitant to start because they think they'll end up just making their condition or their injury worse. And what we can do is in physiotherapy is really help by adjusting the program, adjusting the exercises, and make sure that it's specific and individualized to you based on if you do have those injuries or conditions. So exercises and plans will be planned out to make sure that we're placing optimal load and stress on the injured area, so that we can try to recover it if it's something that we can recover from. And if not, then how can we make this training still worthwhile and still meaningful, in order to try and help reduce the pain that you're feeling, or just to help increase your function. So yeah, so in physio, we can really help with all of these things here, and try and guide you into making an exercise program that works for you based on your specific goals. Okay, so the last part here before our question and answer period, I'll give you a demo and a little bit of a description of the fundamental movement patterns. So these are certain fundamental movement patterns that kind of serve as the foundation for most movements that we want to complete in our daily lives. So these are kind of our base movements. So we need these movements for completing so many different functional tasks, and it's important to make sure that we're training these movements as well, so that we're ready for whatever life throws at us. In a strength training program, we should make sure that we're incorporating these fundamental movements, or even if it's not these specific movements, then we should have at least some variations of these movements, just to make sure that we're hitting all of the major muscle groups in the body. So I will talk through the 6 movements that we have here on the screen, and then I will give you a demo of three of them. So those being the squat, the deadlift, and upper body push here as well. All right, so for the squat, I'll talk through kind of some common mistakes that we see, and then I'll give a demo at the end afterwards. So squat's super important for so many different activities in our day-to-day life. So we need to be able to squat down, to sit down on a chair, to be able to stand up from the chair again, to be able to sit and stand from the toilet, from a car, from a couch. All of those movements, we really need to be able to bend down like we do in a squat. Some common mistakes we see when people are squatting is that they bring their chest too far forward, they lift their heels, their knees cave in when they squat, and then they actually breath hold too, so they're not breathing properly throughout the movement. I'll show you what all of those look like in a minute here. The second fundamental movement that we'll discuss is a deadlift. So a deadlift, also known as a hip hinge, those can kind of be interchangeable here. So common mistakes that we see with a deadlift are bending at the back too much or rounding the back. If you're holding a weight, some people will hold the weight really far from their body, which can kind of put us in a little bit of a vulnerable position there. And then again, breath holding. So not knowing how to incorporate your breathing into your movements to make sure that we're not holding our breath throughout the movement. And then deadlifts, similar to squats, are super important for many activities that we need. Reaching down to pick something up off the floor. If we don't have the space around us to do a full squat, we do need to be able to hinge at the hips to pick up things in that way. We've got a lunge, which is next. So I won't do the demo for the lunge, but a lunge is also a really important movement for doing stairs, bending down to pick something up again if you're in kind of a half lunge position. Getting up off of the floor also oftentimes we'll go into a lunge position and then push up from there. The next one we have is the upper body push. So this includes a push up and any sort of activity, where you're pushing something away from you. So whether that's pushing open a door, if you're putting something away on the top cupboard and you're having an object close to your body like this and you're pushing it up above you, that would include an upper body push motion that we would be doing at different times throughout the day. And I'll demo that one in a push-up form shortly. For those ones, oftentimes we'll see mistakes. People will kind of flare their elbows out to the side. So they bring their elbows really wide out this way instead of having them nice and tucked about 45 degrees from the body. We also see people having their hands really far in front of them. So their wrists and their shoulders are not really stacked up on top of one another. And then we also see people who kind of cave in at the shoulders. So they're not keeping an active, strong back. They're kind of making a divot in between both shoulder blades where their back is collapsing inwards. We don't want to see that either. After the upper body push, we've got the upper body pull. So another movement that's super important for our daily lives, we need to be able to pull things towards us, right? If we're getting something from a cupboard and we're bringing it to us, that would be an example of a pulling motion to us. If we are sitting down and we're trying to pull an object that's on the table closer to us, we need to be able to do that movement of bringing objects or our hands to our body. And then the last one here is a carry. So think about carrying groceries, carrying a suitcase, carrying the garbage out down the street. We need to be able to hold on to things and not lose our balance when we're doing that, right? So those are the 6 movements. So I will demo 3 of them, as I mentioned here, and I'll just make sure that you can see me. Okay, I think that should be good. So first we'll start off with the squat. All right, so as I mentioned with the squat, and I'll just be showing you kind of the basic movements here. There's variations to all of these, but we'll just start off with the basics. So for the squat, you want to start out with the feet about hip width apart here. Toes can be rotated outwards just slightly, whatever's most comfortable for you. And what you want to do is you're bending at the knees and at the hips, coming down this way. What I said before about knees not caving in. So we don't want to see your knees collapse inwards this way. we want to make sure that they're staying nice and straight as you go down, and they should be kind of tracking over top of your toes as you go down into the squat. And then I'll show you from the side here. As I go down, we don't want my chest to be falling forward too much. We want to make sure that we're staying nice and upright in the chest and nice and strong in the upper body. I think you can see me okay here. So as I go down, I'm maintaining a nice solid upper body. I'm not lifting my heels. So heels stay down on the ground. Upper body is nice and straight. I don't want to be bent over like that. And then one thing too I'll mention before getting into the deadlift demo is that with all of these motions, when we're talking about not breath holding, so when we're talking about the breath, a simple trick would be when you're doing any sort of activity, most activities, as you're doing the easier part of the movement, you want to do an inhale. And then as you are completing the harder part of the movement, in the case of a squat, it's going to be standing back up. That's when you'd want to do your exhale. So I'll show you here one more time. So as I squat, I'm going to inhale as I come down. And then the harder part of the motion, which is actually standing up from the squat, is when I'm going to want to exhale. Just like that. All right, so next I'll show the deadlift here. So for the deadlift, same idea with the breath. The deadlift, I'll show you from the front first, again, starting with feet kind of shoulder width apart here. With the deadlift, you're gonna have a little bit of a bend in the knees, but much less than the squat. So we don't want the knees to move too much when we're doing a deadlift. We just want them to have a little bit of a soft bend. So we're thinking about really hinging at the hips with the deadlift and thinking about reaching back with the bum as we bend down. Sometimes it's helpful if you put your hands kind of on your hip creases like this, and then that kind of cues you to where you should be hinging. So as I go down, I'm keeping a nice solid upper back, nice and straight from my upper back, and I'm really hinging, reaching my bum back, keeping a soft bend in the knees. And then as I come up, I want to think about driving through the movement and really squeezing, using my glutes and my hamstrings to lift up. So I'll show you from the side again. You're going to bend forward, keeping a nice straight back. As soon as you feel that stretch in the hamstrings and the glutes, that's kind of when you stop. And then from here, we exhale as we drive up with the glutes and the hamstrings. So like I mentioned with the squat, same thing with the deadlift. As we go down, we want to inhale. As we come back up to standing is when we would exhale, and that's kind of when we give that big force generation of the movement. Okay, and then the last one that I will show is the push-up. So like I mentioned, common mistakes are not are having that caving in between the shoulder blades. If you're new to a push-up, I would suggest starting with a knee push-up. So I'll show you that one here. Hopefully you can see me okay here. Same thing with the push-up with the breath. So as you come down towards the floor, that's going to be when you want to inhale. And then as you push back up through the hands, that's when you would that's when the exhale should happen. So if I'm getting set up in my knee push-up here, I want to make sure that my wrists are pretty much directly under my shoulders, and knees should be further back. So we don't want to be in a full tabletop position, or else we're not going to be able to get a good, nice, solid push-up. We want the knees further back so that when I go down into my push-up, I'm maintaining a nice solid line here. And again, I want to breathe in. Elbows should come back at about 45 degrees, and breathe out as I push up, and making sure that our upper back stays nice and strong. All right, so that's it for the demos today. So again, we have a little bit of time for some questions, if any of you have questions. And if not, we just want to really thank you for being here tonight. And we hope that you got something out of it. It was really fun to be here with you all. And I hope that that it was helpful in terms of trying to incorporate some strength training into your own life if you're not already doing so. And feel free to give us a call or send an email if you're interested in learning more about any of our programs as well.